The famous Epsom Festival kicks off today, but the animal rights group Animal Rising, who disrupted the Grand National, if you remember, are now planning to halt this weekend's Derby too.
Well, it comes after the Jockey Club were granted a High Court injunction in a bid to prevent protesters from disrupting the races.
We're joined now by the Chief Executive of the Jockey Club, Nevin Truesdale. Good morning to you, Nevin. So let's start off with you, if we could. Are you expecting disruption? What do you have in place to stop it? But more to the point, will racegoers face the race being delayed, as we saw with the Grand National?
Well, first of all, Martin, thank you for having me on. And just to come to the first part of your question first, yes, as you'd expect at any major sporting event, there would be significant security in place and crowd control, ultimately for people's safety. And the Derby Festival, one of the biggest sporting landmarks in the calendar, I think it's fair to say, is no different to that. Of course, this year we're facing the threat of illegal and disruptive protests, and let's be clear that they are illegal. We have put in extra security presence, as you'd expect, working with Surrey Police, working with our security partners, extra fencing around the site, which is a huge shame because it is going to impact the viewing of some people who are able to come and watch the Derby for free in the middle of the Downs, and accessibility to that will still be there, but it will be there will be restrictions around that in terms of how people are getting in, and these are some of the sacrifices we've had to make because of the very clear and present and illegal threat that we're facing. In terms of your question about the delay, we sincerely hope there will be no delay to the race tomorrow. The High Court injunction was taken out for a reason. Ellie rightly mentioned that in the introduction there. We've done that to protect the event, to protect the participants, including the horses, and also to protect our own people from what would be an incredibly risky and disruptive event. And we obviously saw what happened at Aintree, so we do not wish to see a repeat of that. It's also worth mentioning that we have offered, and Animal Rising have accepted, and we're very pleased that they have, an area at the racecourse for legal protest. And of course, we absolutely support that. It's important that that point of view is put across, and we've got no problem with that at all. But crossing the line to illegality, which could lead to fines and possible prison for people, is something that we utterly condemn.
OK, Nevin, well, stay with us, stay on the line, because we've got Louisa Hillwood with us, who's a spokesperson for Animal Rising. So we've just heard from Nevin there is going to be that area for legal protest. Will you be sticking to that area?
There will be a large group of people protesting out the front, yes, and everyone is welcome to join. Please come down. But just like, in Aintree, I'm sure there will be some people who are willing to step in, use their body to prevent harm from coming to these horses. That's really what we want. We love animals. We want to protect them, as well as to start this conversation about how we use animals and how we exploit them and how that doesn't align with loving them.
I mean, you talk there about some people may feel that they want to use their bodies to protest at the Epsom Derby. I mean, Nevin touched there upon his fear for the safety of the horses. And you can understand that, right? You love horses, you love animals, you don't want to see them come to any harm. But if people are going to be throwing themselves on a racecourse, that's going to spook the horses, and it means they could come to some harm.
Well, let's be clear. What happened at Aintree, for example, at the Grand National, is that people tried to enter the racecourse about 20 minutes before it started. There was no race happening. There was no risk to the horses or to any people.
What do you say to people who say the Epsom Derby, it's the wrong place for a protest like this? It's not the Grand National, which has got all of the jumps. It's a flat track race. There have only been 3 deaths since 2002. Is this the wrong protest at the wrong time?
Well, as we know, a horse dies every other day in racing, and in the month of May, 20 horses died, and this is flat racing season. But horses dying, being killed in races is not the only problem. They have to wear painful bits in their mouth, which controls their whole body. They're whipped. Horses love to run, but they don't love to race. Having someone on your back whipping you, of course, is...
I wonder if we can bring you back in, Nevin, now at this point. Would you like to respond to some of those comments, that it's not just the actual danger of death during the race itself, but it's also the cruel treatment of horses, whipping them and kicking them and all the rest of it?
Yes, I would, Martin. Thank you. This sport has never been safer. These horses exist in order to race, and actually after their racing careers, they give a lot of pleasure to a lot of people. I mean, we can talk about that separately, but the things they do just in terms of helping people's mental health after their careers is also incredibly important. But as to racing, we have a moral obligation to look after these fantastic athletes who we see on the racetrack every day, who love to race. The fatality rate in racing is a third lower than it was 10 years ago. 99.8% of horses come back from their races perfectly safe and sound. This is an industry that's invested 40 million over the last 20 years in welfare provision, in relentless focus on making sure that the sport is made safer with each passing year. And the statistics back that up. There hasn't been, you mentioned, Martin, there being 3 deaths in the Derby since 2002. There hasn't actually been a fatality in the Derby since 2006. There is a phenomenally good safety record, and the relentless focus of racecourse officials, clerks of the course, stable staff, trainers, is on making sure these horses are fantastically well treated and looked after, because without racing, they simply would not exist, Martin. That's the fundamental flaw in Animal Rising's arguments, that ultimately the end of racing leads to the end of breeding of the thoroughbred, which leads ultimately to the extinction. That seems to be what Animal Rising are aiming at, alongside using racing as a significant platform. And let's face it, it is a significant platform. It's the second most watched spectator sport in the country. It has over 100 days of live terrestrial TV coverage. And Nathan McGovern, one of Louisa's colleagues, effectively admitted this in an interview with Lee Moddishead, senior writer of the Racing Post, yesterday, where he basically said that actually it's not really about horse welfare for Animal Rising. It's about a bigger agenda, as indeed Louisa's touched on, which effectively would mean the elimination of pets and the elimination of any human interaction with animals, which ultimately means animals not being cared for.
OK, Louisa, let's bring that back to you. Some really good points there made by Nevin. He says, essentially, if it wasn't for horse racing, then these horses wouldn't exist. They wouldn't be bred in the first place. That a horse hasn't died at the Derby since 2006. He says the sport has never been safer. What do you say to that?
Well, Nevin touched on a few really important points. And I firstly just want to say that I grew up alongside an animal, a chocolate Labrador called Chocker, and I loved him, and he didn't have to do anything for me. He didn't have to serve me or earn me money to be worthy of that love. And I think it's just a shame that, with racehorses and with animals in other industries like the food system, they have to be worth money. They have to do something for us to be worth, a life.
So is that what Nevin is touching upon there, the bigger agenda that you have? Do you not want people to keep pets?
No, not at all. I definitely see value in spending time with animals. Our shelters are overflowing, and definitely if you can adopt an animal, if you have space for that in your life, it's an amazing thing to do. But that is not, what's happening with racehorses. As Nevin said, if this racehorse is not earning money, then what happens to them? I mean, they're killed.
Well, they wouldn't be bred in the first place, is the point that he is making. But he also says that these horses are loved by the jockeys. They're loved by the people who breed them and care for them. Essentially, they are horse lovers too, because that's the industry, the business that they're in.
I don't doubt that they do love horses. I can see that Nevin does. I do as well. But the way that we are treating animals, and not just horses, but animals, as I say, in the food system as well, is that how we show love for animals, by saying that they have to serve us and have this particular purpose, to live out their lives?
And Louisa, where do you draw the line on leather? Unless you've got some nice Dr. Martin boots on there. Are they vegan or are they leather?
Are.
They're vegan Dr. Martens.
Of course.
Well done. That was meant to be a gotcha moment, but you dodged it quite neatly. So what do you say to racegoers who just say, look, keep politics out and just let us enjoy the day?
I think that there are much better, more fun things that we could be doing on our Saturday that doesn't involve, supporting an industry that causes the deaths of thousands of horses. And it's a shame that we, the only way that we can enjoy horses is by going to these races. Imagine if we could see wild horses and go and experience them that way and not have to, exploit them or subjugate them.
Okay.
Yeah. Nevin, the last word to you. You've got 20 seconds.
Can I just come in on that? This is a sport that is enjoyed by millions of people around the world, that contributes significantly to the economy. But just on the money point, very few people in racing get into racing to make money as owners. It's about the return to owners is about 18, 20p in the pound. People do racing. People own horses because they love them.